Ma'am, I said back upward now.
I'm 72, baby. My knees don't move that fast. Let me call my son. Darius, baby, it's me.
They shoved a 72-year-old churchwoman to the ground and thought it was over, until her son, a quiet man with a military past, showed up and turned the whole city upside down. Loretta Baines wasn't in a rush. She had just said her goodbyes to the women's group at Mount Olive Baptist, the same church she'd been attending every Sunday for 43 years. Her friend, Mrs. Thelma Griggs, was supposed to drive her home like usual. Loretta stood just outside the small brick building, wearing her beige Sunday hat and holding a thin brown cane in one hand and her Bible in the other. It was about 6:12 p.m. The air still held that thick Alabama heat even in late September. She spotted blue and red lights reflecting off the nearby chain-link fence. 2 squad cars had pulled over a beat-up Nissan about 40 feet from the church lot. She didn't pay it much mind, figured it was just another traffic stop. But then she heard yelling. Not from the driver, but from the officers. She turned her head slowly. She wasn't nosy, just concerned. One of the officers, a young white man with a thin frame, was giving conflicting instructions. "Hands out the window," he barked. Then, not 5 seconds later, "Get out of the car now." The young man in the car, barely more than a teenager, froze. His hands trembled. A few members from the church were watching too. No one stepped closer. Everyone knew how quickly things could go sideways these days. Loretta called out, "Y'all be careful now," like a mother would, her voice soft but audible. That was it. That's all she said. But then she felt the attention shift. One of the officers, not the one yelling, turned around and started walking toward her. "You need to back up, ma'am," he said, motioning with his hand. "I'm just standing by the church steps," Loretta replied, barely moving. "Ain't crossing no line." The officer told her again to move back, this time more firmly. But she didn't think she needed to. She wasn't near the scene, and she was clearly no threat. The church steps had always been a place of safety, not suspicion. He took another step toward her. "I said back up, ma'am." "I'm 72 years old, son. My knees don't back up that fast," she said with a small smile, still trying to de-escalate without even realizing it. Then it happened fast. Too fast. The officer reached for her cane. "You need to move now." "I am moving, child." He yanked the cane before she could finish. Loretta stumbled. Her right foot gave out on the pavement and her whole body followed. She fell hard. Her hat rolled off. Her Bible slapped the concrete. And her head cracked against the curb with a sound that made every witness stop breathing for a second. The video is only 47 seconds long. It's shot from the hand of a teenager across the street. The footage isn't shaky, it's heartbreakingly steady. You can clearly see Loretta lying there, motionless, one hand twitching as if she's trying to collect herself before her body lets her. You hear someone scream, "Why'd y'all do that? She didn't do nothing." Another voice says, "Call an ambulance." But what stands out most in the footage isn't the fall, or the gasps, or the sound of sirens in the distance. It's what Loretta says next. Her voice is low, raspy, but it cuts through the chaos like a blade. She says, "Let me make one call, just one." One of the officers tries to talk over her, but she repeats it. "Let me call my son." They let her. Probably figured it wouldn't matter. Probably thought she didn't have anyone who could do much about it. She dialed one number. No contacts, no voice commands, just muscle memory. He picked up on the second ring. She said his name once, that's all. And everything started changing. But what no one on that scene knew was who Loretta's son really was. Darius Baines answered the phone like he always did when his mother called. "Hey, Ma." No one else heard what she said, but whatever it was, it turned the air inside his house still. The fan kept spinning overhead, but Darius didn't move for 5 seconds. Just stood there in that small home he'd built on 2 acres outside Temple, Texas, staring out the window with a look that hadn't crossed his face in years. He didn't ask questions, didn't need to. He just said, "All right," and hung up. In the next 10 minutes, he changed shirts, pulled a battered duffel from the back of his closet, and tossed in only the things that mattered. 2 phones, a USB drive, and a worn-out folder sealed in plastic. He didn't pack clothes. By the time his neighbor, an older man named Chuck, who ran the scrapyard down the road, waved from his porch, Darius was already in his truck, heading east on I-20. It was about 7:09 p.m. Nobody in town knew much about Darius. He'd been back a few years, real quiet, helped fix fences when storms hit, donated anonymously to the middle school's broken water system, volunteered with the VFW when they asked. But nobody had ever really asked about his past. They just respected the silence. What they didn't know was that Darius Baines hadn't just served. He'd been deployed 12 times across 4 continents. He'd spoken languages most Americans had never heard. He'd sat in rooms where no names were used, only nods. Missions with no paper trail. Clean extractions. Silent endings. He had left all that behind when his father passed. Moved back to be closer to Loretta. Thought maybe he could live like a normal man. But now that life was back in his rearview mirror, he crossed into Mississippi just after 11 p.m. and didn't stop for gas until he was almost in Tuscaloosa. When he got back on the road, he made one call, not to a friend, not to a family member, to a number labeled Oric. A gravelly voice answered, "No hello, just breathing." "I need you to pull a badge number," Darius said. Pause. Then, "Which city?" "Birmingham PD. Officer on scene at a traffic stop outside Mount Olive Baptist tonight. He laid hands on Loretta." Another pause. "Time frame?" "Between 6 and 7. Name's not on the tape, but he's wearing badge 6543. "I'll send it in an hour." "Not enough. I need everything. Record, priors, complaint history. Send it to my private inbox, encrypted." "Understood." No goodbye, just click. By the time Darius crossed into Alabama, the message had already come through. Officer Alan Detmer, rookie, 2 years on the force. Transferred from Gadsden PD after a misconduct investigation that had been quietly closed without charges. Darius didn't show emotion. He just filed the info where it belonged, in the growing list of names. At 3:38 a.m., he pulled into the parking lot of the same hospital Loretta had been taken to. He didn't head for the ER entrance. He walked straight through the side doors by the loading dock. He knew they wouldn't stop him. The night nurse glanced up. Darius spoke without raising his voice. "Loretta Baines, where is she?" "She's stable, room 204 West Wing, but—" He was already moving. When he opened the door to her room, Loretta was awake. Her left temple had a thick white bandage. She had an IV in one arm, her cane leaning beside the bed, but her eyes were clear, tired but steady. "Hey, baby," she said softly. He walked over and kissed her on the forehead, then pulled the chair close and sat down without saying a word for a minute. "You all right?" he finally asked. She nodded slowly. "Could have been worse." He took her hand gently. "I'm gonna fix this." Loretta didn't smile. She didn't argue either. "You sure?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Darius just said, "Yes, ma'am." She sighed, closed her eyes for a few seconds, then opened them again. "I didn't raise you for vengeance, Dee." "I know," he said. "This ain't that." She didn't press, she didn't have to. He stayed with her until sunrise, but by the time the sun hit the blinds, Darius had already planned his first move. By 7:22 a.m., Darius stood back where it all happened, on the edge of the church parking lot near the cracked concrete where Loretta's hat had landed. He didn't need to imagine it. He'd already watched the video 6 times on the way over. Angles, body positions, officer behavior. He'd broken down every frame like a mission briefing. The pastor, Reverend Carl Ingram, came out with a cup of black coffee and handed it to him without a word. They knew each other from years ago, not close, but close enough. "She's still resting?" the Reverend asked quietly. "Yeah," Darius replied, eyes scanning the scene. "She said you tried to step in." "I tried. They told me to step back or be arrested, said I was interfering with a lawful stop." Darius sipped his coffee, then looked over at the camera mounted on a crooked utility pole across the street. "You think that thing works?" Reverend Ingram gave a bitter laugh. "Only when they want it to." I'm gonna find out. He walked away before the Reverend could say anything else. He drove straight to the Birmingham Police Department South Precinct, a small red brick building tucked between a pawn shop and an auto parts store. He walked in wearing jeans, an old gray shirt, and the kind of stillness that made people nervous without knowing why. The officer behind the desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I need to speak to whoever's in charge of the Detmer incident last night." The officer blinked. "Excuse me?" "Alan Detmer, badge 6543. He was involved in a use of force case outside Mount Olive Baptist." "Sir, I'm not sure. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to speak to the watch commander." "I can take your name and number." Darius leaned forward slightly. "Or you can get him now." The young officer hesitated, then picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, Lieutenant Ronald Green appeared. He looked like a man used to authority, a broad shoulders, square jaw, clean uniform. He extended his hand, but Darius didn't take it. "You're the son?" the lieutenant asked. "Yes. I heard about the incident. It's under review." "No, it's not. I checked the system this morning. No official report was filed. Your officer left the scene before paramedics arrived. The fall wasn't logged. No footage submitted. That's not a review. That's a cover-up." Lieutenant Green's expression shifted slightly. "Now hold on. I'm sure that's not the full story." Darius handed him a printed copy of the video transcript. "That's your officer taking a cane from a 72-year-old woman who posed no threat and knocking her to the pavement. She was in the hospital before your department even logged the stop." Green looked at the paper, then back at Darius. "We'll look into it. If you'd like to file a formal complaint—" "I don't file complaints," Darius said flatly. "I document evidence." There was a pause. Green's tone got firmer. "Look, I get that you're upset, but barging in here isn't how this works. If you have concerns, there's a process." Darius smiled just barely. "Let me tell you something, Lieutenant. I've sat across tables from warlords, watched grown men lie with a smile while their hands were still bloody. You think I don't know what a cover-up smells like? Your guy thought no one would care about an old black woman with a cane. He was wrong." Green clenched his jaw. "This isn't helping your case." "I'm not building a case. I'm building pressure." Darius turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. Tell Detmer not to delete anything from his phone. If any files go missing, I'll subpoena his cloud backups personally." The room stayed silent until the door closed behind him. By the time Darius reached his truck, he had already texted the video to 4 different encrypted drives and 2 lawyers he trusted. But the visit wasn't just to make noise, it was to let them know he was watching. And he wasn't alone. By mid-afternoon, Darius was back at the hospital, sitting by his mother's bedside as she dozed. He kept the blinds half closed. Outside, the Alabama sun glared against the windows, but his focus stayed on his phone. He'd already mapped out the call logs from the officers on scene. One of them had texted twice right after the incident. Once to a supervisor and once to a private number Darius didn't recognize. He'd find out who it belonged to soon. Around 3:12 p.m., a knock came at the door. It was a woman, short, sharp eyes, hair pulled into a tight bun. "Mr. Baines?" "Yes." "I'm Sergeant Kristen Malone, Internal Affairs." Darius stood. She offered her hand. This time he shook it, but briefly. "I'm conducting a preliminary review. Just wanted to touch base and check on your mother." "She's sleeping." "I won't take long," Malone said, stepping inside anyway. "I've been assigned to make sense of what happened, and I want you to know—" "You here for accountability?" Darius asked. She looked at him. "I'm here to follow procedure." "Then we're not talking." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I don't have faith in your procedures," he said calmly. "The officer who put my mother in this bed was protected by those same procedures just a year ago. I've seen his prior record." "Look, Mr. Baines, I understand you're angry." "I'm not angry," he cut in. "I'm informed." She shifted. "There's a way to handle this. Filing a complaint, cooperating with an internal review. That's how this gets resolved." He stepped a little closer, lowering his voice. "No, Sergeant. That's how this gets buried. He walks with a slap on the wrist, paperwork gets lost, and in 6 months he's pulling over someone else's mother." Malone didn't respond. Not right away. Then she said, "You're not wrong, but there's still a process I have to follow." Darius nodded. "You do what you have to. I'll do the same." As she left, Loretta stirred. "That a cop?" "Yeah," Darius replied. "She mean well?" "I think so." "Think that matters?" "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Outside the hospital, Darius parked himself in a back booth at Miller's Cafe, small, dusty place. Not many people that afternoon. He opened his laptop and started pulling documents, not from public servers, but from a private archive. One he'd built over time after seeing too many incidents like this. The badge records, arrest discrepancies, internal transfers, he linked them all. And then he sent an email. Subject line, Incident 9.27, Mount Olive, BPD South Precinct, excessive force. Attached, video, transcript, officer records, timeline. He sent it to 3 news desks, 1 local, 2 national. He didn't include his name. Then he called someone he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. A voice answered on the second ring. "Darius, I need eyes on Birmingham." The voice on the other end chuckled softly. "Still short on small talk, I see." "Still don't have time for it," Darius replied. "Can you help?" "You know I can." "You remember Galloway?" Photographic memory. "I need him. And I need Terrell." "You know what kind of thing I'm dealing with." The voice grew quiet. Then, "How soon?" "Now." "Where's your mother?" "Recovering. She's strong." "Good." Click. By nightfall, Galloway and Terrell were on the road from Tallahassee and Chattanooga, respectively. They weren't military anymore, not in uniform, but their skills never left. Galloway handled comms and legal. Terrell worked in tech and records extraction. Darius didn't need muscle. He needed reach. He sat outside the hospital that night and looked out at the streetlights blinking over tired storefronts and fading billboards. This wasn't about taking over a city. He wasn't trying to burn anything down. He just wanted accountability. But what he also knew, and what the city hadn't figured out yet, was that silence only works when no one's listening. And now, people were starting to listen. But it wasn't just the public watching anymore. There were eyes inside the department starting to shift too. Galloway didn't knock when he arrived. He never did. Darius opened the door to his motel room and stepped aside without a word. Galloway walked in carrying a tan canvas satchel, a slight limp in his left leg from a breakback in 008 that never fully healed. He looked older now, crow's feet deeper, hair a little thinner, but his mind was just as sharp as the day they ran missions through Jordan together. "You look exactly the same," Galloway said, setting the bag down. "You don't," Darius replied, pulling up a chair. They both chuckled. Brief, quiet, familiar. "Terrell?" Darius asked. "About 30 minutes out, he's bringing the gear." Darius nodded, then slid over a folder. "That's the officer, Alan Detmer. Got pushed through a fast-track academy. Daddy's cousin runs procurement in Jefferson County. Got written up last year for manhandling a 14-year-old. IA lost the footage." Galloway read quickly. "Jesus." "He's not the only one," Darius added. "There's a pattern of this precinct bearing use of force incidents. I've mapped 5 in the last year alone, mostly older folks, black, poor, no legal backup." Galloway looked up. "And now they messed with Loretta." That was their mistake. By the time Terrell arrived, it was just after 9 o'clock p.m. He didn't waste time unpacking. Pulled out 2 laptops, a portable scanner, and a modified Wi-Fi interceptor that fit inside a shoebox. He grinned as he set it on the table. "Let's see what these clowns been hiding." Darius pointed at the wall. "PD's internal network is 5 blocks that way. Keep it clean, no active interference, just listening." "Copy that," Terrell said, already typing. "Once we ID the chain of command," Galloway added, "we can push. Quietly. Get people talking. Make them nervous enough to leak without being asked." Darius leaned back. "Already started that. Footage went out last night. Public's reacting, but slow. They're testing the waters." "They always do," Galloway said, "till it hits the right nerve." While they worked, Loretta sat alone at the hospital watching the local news. Nothing on the broadcast yet, but she knew it was coming. She'd seen the look in Darius's eyes that morning. It was the same one he wore at his father's funeral. Quiet strength, yes, but something colder just beneath the surface. At 10:45 p.m., Darius and the team found something. Internal messages. One flagged as confidential priority, sent from the precinct's deputy chief to a small group of officers. It read, "Do not share body cam, do not comment publicly, narrative will be handled. Remind all personnel to coordinate statements if contacted by press." Galloway sat back disgusted. "They're circling wagons." Darius replied, "Then we set fire to the wagons." Over the next hour, they built a chain, not of accusations, but evidence. Each officer who received the message, their connection to previous complaints, the clerk who adjusted timestamps, the medic who accidentally omitted head trauma from Loretta's ER report. It was all there, nothing speculative, just cold, verifiable facts. At midnight, Darius sent another message, this time to a contact in D.C. who owed him a favor from back in Kandahar. Not law enforcement, not a politician, a journalist, the kind who didn't flinch when the story was ugly. He attached the chain of messages, the video, the history of suppression. The reply came 4 minutes later. "I'll be on the 6 a.m. flight." Darius closed the laptop. "They wanted quiet," he said. "We'll give them a crowd." The next morning, posters began showing up around the city, black and white printouts with a screenshot from the video, Loretta lying on the pavement. Above it, "Ask Birmingham PD why this woman is in the hospital." Underneath, had "Justice for Loretta." They weren't professionally made, they weren't flashy, but they were everywhere. Taped to bus stops, tacked to barbershop windows, slid under windshield wipers and grocery store lots. The department had no official comment. And that silence? That's what made people start asking questions. But this wasn't just a PR storm brewing, it was the start of a breakdown from the inside. By noon that day, the phones at Birmingham PD weren't just ringing, they were lighting up. Citizens calling in, community leaders demanding a press conference, reporters knocking on the door asking for records. And someone inside the department had finally slipped. A copy of Detmer's original incident report, the one supposedly never filed, landed in Galloway's inbox through a secure drop. No sender listed. But it was real. Typed out, timestamped the same night Loretta hit the pavement. It said she was verbally aggressive, refused lawful instruction, and initiated physical interference with the officer's space. Terrell read it aloud and looked disgusted. She's 5'2" and 72 years old. Her interference was standing still with a cane. "They're building a defense," Galloway said. "Classic overreach. They'll say she was obstructing, trying to provoke, then they'll pull the mental health card." Darius barely reacted. Just stared at the file like he was looking through it. He reached for his phone. This time he didn't call anyone from the past. He called someone from Loretta's present, the nurse on duty the night she was brought in. "Miss Wanda, this is Loretta Baines." "Oh yes, baby, your mama's doing okay. She ate a little bit this morning. I know I need a favor. You remember how she was when they wheeled her in? She was groggy, kept asking for you. Was she aggressive? Combative?" Wanda sounded confused. "No, Lord, no. She was scared. Her blood pressure was sky high. Couldn't even sit upright." "Could you say that on record?" There was a pause. "You gonna put me in trouble?" "No, I'm gonna put the people who hurt my mother in trouble. I just need your voice. One sentence. That's all." Another pause. Then a sigh. "Okay, baby. I'll say it." By evening, Darius had audio from Wanda, 3 affidavits from church members who witnessed the incident, and a timeline that proved Detmer had already drawn his baton before Loretta said a single word. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, a small crowd began to gather. Not shouting, just standing, holding signs with Loretta's photo, some holding canes in quiet solidarity. A young officer inside the building whispered to his partner, "Who is she?" The partner shrugged. "Just some lady, but her kid, I heard he used to be special ops. Now he's got people crawling through our records." That night, a local reporter named Lee Torres went live from the sidewalk. She didn't scream or dramatize. She just told the truth. An elderly woman injured at a traffic stop. a department slow to respond, and a son who wasn't letting it go. By 10 p.m., it hit regional news, then Reddit, then a legal blog that specialized in police misconduct cases. And that's when things started cracking from the inside. Anonymous emails rolled in from dispatchers, from former officers, from clerks. One said, "Look into the logs from 9/12. 2 other complaints about Detmer, both sealed." Another, "There's body cam footage from that night. They're holding it until IA clears a statement." The most shocking came from a woman only identified as M. She said she was once engaged to a patrol sergeant. She still had his tablet from their time living together, and the tablet had synced with the department cloud. She'd seen the raw video. It showed the moment Detmer took Loretta's cane. It showed her fall, somehow not resisting, not interfering, just standing, and then bleeding. She offered to hand it over. No money, no reward, just one condition. "I want the world to know what he did." Terrell met her in a public park during daylight. She brought the tablet in a shopping bag with no charger, no case. She said, "Tell that woman I'm sorry no one stepped in." He nodded. "You just did." Back in the motel room, they played the footage. It was clear. No edits, no cuts, audio intact. Darius watched it once, then again. Then he clicked upload and sent it to 6 journalists, 1 from Alabama, 1 from Texas, 4 from outlets that never looked away when things got hard. 2 hours later, the video was live. It got 312,000 views in 4 hours. And suddenly, people didn't just care. They were angry, but anger alone wasn't enough. It was time to bring the truth into the building where it started. The next morning, the front doors of the Birmingham Police Department didn't open to their usual trickle of early complaints and routine paperwork. They opened to a press truck, a cluster of folding chairs, and a growing crowd. At 8:02 a.m., Darius walked into the station with 2 things: a hard drive and a printed folder of witness statements. He wasn't there to plead, he wasn't there to threaten, he was there to give them a choice. Lieutenant Green met him in the hallway, flanked by a public relations officer who looked like she hadn't slept. "Mr. Baines, now's not really the time, It's exactly the time," Darius interrupted. "Where's your chief?" "He's not in today." "Then you're him for now." Green crossed his arms. "We're already reviewing everything. The footage, the report." Darius cut him off again. "I have the raw footage. I have multiple eyewitnesses. And I have a federal attorney in my back pocket waiting to light this department up if you all try to hide one more file." Green glanced toward the glass doors. Protesters were holding signs. A few were filming. "You want to talk privately?" Green asked. "No," Darius said. "I want you to see this with your own eyes." He handed over the drive. A few minutes later, they were seated in a small conference room. The PR officer nervously typing on a laptop, the drive plugged into the wall-mounted monitor. The room went quiet as the video played. They saw it all, clear as day. Loretta Baines standing quietly. Alan Detmer, agitated, his hand snatching her cane, her body collapsing like a puppet whose strings had been cut, her head striking the curb. No resistance, no yelling, no crime, just a 72-year-old woman treated like she was disposable. When the screen went black, no one spoke for a moment. Then Darius said, "Your officer lied. Your report is fiction, and your department tried to bury a woman who spent her entire life teaching 3rd graders and singing in the church choir." The PR officer started to speak. Green raised a hand to silence her. "You're right," Green said, quiet but clear. "There's no defending what I just saw." Darius leaned forward. "Then don't." Green sighed. "What do you want?" "I want Officer Detmer suspended without pay, pending full investigation. I want a public apology to my mother, not a press release, a face-to-face apology. I want the body cam footage released. And I want your department to reopen every use of force case that's been sealed in the last 3 years." The PR officer nearly choked. "That's not how it works." Darius turned to her. "That's how it's going to work." Green rubbed his face. He looked tired, not just from the situation, from carrying something he probably knew had been rotten for longer than he cared to admit. "You'll get your apology," he said. "I'll suspend Detmer today. The rest, I need time." You have 24 hours, Darius said. After that, the footage hits national syndication and a civil rights lawyer with teeth files a federal claim. Green didn't respond, he just nodded. Darius stood. Appreciate your time, Lieutenant. Let's not waste any more of it. He left without shaking hands. Outside, he didn't address the crowd, he didn't raise his voice or make a statement, he just walked straight to the sidewalk where his mother had fallen and stood there, quiet, still. Reporters shouted questions, people tried to hand him flyers, hug him, ask him what was next. He said nothing. Inside the department, Green sat back down, head in his hands. He knew this wasn't over, not even close. By that evening, the suspension was announced. The department confirmed an internal investigation into procedural failures. A spokesperson admitted the incident did not meet the standards expected of our officers. But the apology, that was what mattered most to Loretta. It happened just after sundown. Detmer, clearly nervous, clearly coached, stood in her hospital room beside two other officers and read from a written statement. I'm sorry for the harm caused, Mrs. Baines. It was never my intention. Loretta stared at him for a long time. Then she said, You may not have meant to hurt me, but you still did. He looked away. She didn't. But Darius wasn't done yet, because now that the truth was out, it was time to make sure it never got buried again. The apology didn't end anything. It only confirmed what everyone had seen with their own eyes, that an innocent woman had been harmed and the system had tried to hide it. The next morning, local headlines read, Officer suspended after elderly woman injured during stop. But the words felt hollow. There was no mention of the cover-up, no accountability for the supervisor who approved the false report, no explanation for why the body cam footage had been hidden in the first place. Darius sat beside Loretta's hospital bed, her hand resting in his. You sure you want to go public with the rest of it? She asked, voice low. He nodded. They still think this'll blow over, that people will forget. Loretta gave a faint smile. You're your father's son. He didn't smile back. He was already focused on what had to come next. By that afternoon, Galloway had compiled a comprehensive dossier, a timeline of 5 previous excessive force cases buried under bureaucracy. Each one followed the same pattern. Physical injury, no formal charges filed, body cam footage withheld, complaints marked as unsubstantiated, different victims, same department, same outcome. But this time, there was a name the city couldn't ignore, Loretta Baines. Darius brought the documents straight to City Hall. He didn't schedule a meeting, he walked right in. Security tried to stop him, but a councilwoman named Dr. Eliza Monroe recognized him and intervened. Let him speak, she said. Everyone else is talking about him. We might as well hear from the source. In the small meeting chamber, Darius laid everything out. Calm, clear, no speeches, just facts. You have a department that protects itself at the expense of the people it's sworn to serve, he said. This isn't about one officer, it's about an entire culture. One councilman shifted in his seat. You're asking us to do what? Fire half the precinct? No. Darius said, I'm asking you to investigate them and to stop pretending that silence is neutrality. Councilwoman Monroe leaned forward. What happens if we don't? Darius didn't blink. Then we go bigger. Federal complaint, national media, civil lawsuits from every buried victim I can find, and believe me, I'll find them. There was no bravado in his voice, just certainty. Later that evening, while city officials debated behind closed doors, something happened outside the building that no one expected. A crowd had gathered on the steps. Not huge, but steady. Men and women of all ages. Quiet. Holding candles. Holding signs. Some holding copies of Loretta's photo, others holding photos of their own mothers. At the center stood Loretta herself, supported on both sides by church friends, her cane in one hand, her purse in the other. She spoke softly, but every word carried. I'm not the first person this happened to. I may not even be the last. But if standing here makes the next woman safer, then I'll stand until my legs give out. Applause followed, gentle but firm. No chants, no shouting, just people who'd had enough. The next day, under mounting pressure, the police chief announced his resignation. 3 officers, including Detmer's direct supervisor, were placed on administrative leave. An independent review board was convened to audit past misconduct cases. The city tried to frame it as accountability. Darius knew better. It was survival. In the motel room later that night, Galloway looked over at him. "You could have gone nuclear, burned them down publicly." "I didn't need to," Darius said. "The truth was louder than I'll ever be." Terrell leaned back in his chair. "So you done?" Darius stared out the window at the lights flickering across the street. "No, just finished the first part." Because he wasn't here for vengeance. He never had been. He was here for change, and change didn't end with one apology or one resignation. It started there. But sometimes, after the storm clears, you learn who really stood with you and who was just waiting for the noise to pass. 3 weeks later, Loretta Baines stepped out of the hospital on her own 2 feet. No fanfare, no press, just the soft shuffle of her walking shoes and the tap of her cane against the concrete as she made her way to the passenger side of Darius's truck. She gripped the door with one hand, looked up at her son, and said, "Help me up." Darius reached down, not as a soldier, not as a fighter, just as a son. She settled into the seat slowly, exhaling as she leaned back. "You good?" he asked. "I'm better than I was," she answered. "That's all I need to be right now." The ride home was quiet. Familiar streets, familiar faces. People waved. Not all of them knew the full story, but they knew enough. And that was new. Before, Loretta had just been Miss Baines, the Sunday school teacher, the retired 3rd grade instructor who baked peach cobbler for funerals and never missed choir rehearsal. Now people looked at her differently. With reverence, some with guilt, and a few with that quiet kind of respect that doesn't need word. When they pulled into the driveway of her small yellow house, the same house she'd lived in since 1986, she took a long look before getting out. The yard was clean. The porch had been swept. A new mailbox stood at the edge of the lot, freshly painted. "I didn't do that," Darius said, noticing her glance. "I know you didn't," she replied. There was a note pinned to the mailbox with a magnet shaped like a dove. "For Ms. Loretta, thank you for standing tall, Mom, even when on the ground. T.G." Loretta smiled faintly. That's Thelma's handwriting. Inside, everything was just as she left it, but somehow warmer. A few neighbors had been stopping by while she recovered, meals stocked in the freezer, church bulletins stacked neatly by the phone. Someone had even replaced the batteries in her wall clock. Darius helped her sit on the sofa and pulled up a chair. "You gonna stay a while?" she asked him. He nodded. "Yeah." She looked over at him. "You always disappear after things calm down, like you're afraid of peace." "I'm not afraid," he said. "Just don't always recognize it." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Loretta said, "When your father passed, I worried you'd never come back to yourself, that you'd stay out there always chasing shadows." "I tried to," Darius admitted, "but they follow you home either way." She nodded slowly. "Not all shadows are bad. Some just remind you where the light is." Later that day, the doorbell rang. It was Reverend Ingram holding a folder. "I thought you might want this," he said. "Minutes from the church board meeting. They want to name the reading room after you." Loretta chuckled. "They better wait till I'm dead." Reverend Ingram smiled. "You don't get to decide that." As he turned to leave, he looked at Darius. "She raised you right." Darius didn't say anything, just gave a small, silent nod. That night, as the sun dipped low, casting soft gold through the lace curtains, Loretta stood on her porch with her cane in one hand and a warm blanket around her shoulders. A teenager walked by on the sidewalk, one of the kids who used to mow lawns for spare change. He stopped and said, "You feeling okay, Miss Loretta?" She smiled. "I'm still here." The boy nodded. "Good." Then he walked on. Darius watched from the doorway. He didn't say anything, he just let her be. Because sometimes healing isn't loud. It's not about grand gestures or big changes. Sometimes it's just a quiet day, a steady cane, a hot meal, a look in someone's eyes that says, "We see you now." But even as things settled, Darius knew that peace had to be protected. Because silence isn't safety, and quiet doesn't always mean justice. 6 weeks after Loretta's fall, the noise had mostly faded. The press moved on. The hashtag stopped trending. The city released a 5-page progress report promising reforms, training modules, and more transparency. But Darius knew how that worked. Promises didn't fix people. Systems didn't fix themselves. It always came back to pressure and presence. He sat on the front porch of his mother's house, watching the wind shift through the trees. A notebook lay open on his lap, half filled with scribbled names, timestamps, and street corners from other cases he'd uncovered since everything happened. He wasn't trying to be a hero, he was just paying attention. Loretta came outside with 2 mugs of coffee, handed him one. "They still calling you?" she asked. "Some," he said, "lawyers, journalists, a few families. One woman's daughter lost hearing in one ear after a cop slammed her head into a window. Never got an apology." Loretta sat down beside him. "You going to help her?" "I already sent her everything I had." She nodded. "That's good. Just remember to rest too." He didn't answer right away. Then, "I will. Just not yet." Loretta looked out toward the street. "It's strange," she said, "how fast the world forgets." "They didn't forget you," Darius replied. "No, but I was lucky. Some folks don't have sons who know how to fight without throwing punches." He looked over at her. "You weren't lucky, you were right." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Later that afternoon, they visited the church for the first time since the incident. It was a regular Sunday, modest turnout, mostly older folks. Reverend Ingram greeted them at the door and walked Loretta to her seat personally. As Darius stood in the back, a few people approached, quietly, thanking him, not just for his mother, but for making them feel less invisible. After the service, a woman named Bernice pulled him aside. She was in her 60s, held her purse like it contained something fragile. "I saw the way you handled all that," she said, "with grace, with purpose." He didn't know what to say. "You reminded me that not all power looks like shouting," she continued. "Sometimes it looks like stillness, like watching, like refusing to be pushed." Darius finally spoke. "I didn't want a spotlight." "I know," she said. "That's what made people trust you." Back home, Loretta sat down with a stack of letters from strangers across the country. Some just sent prayers. Others shared their own stories. All of them signed their names like they were asking to be counted. She read each one, slowly, out loud, because sometimes being heard is the first step toward being whole. That night, Darius walked through the neighborhood. The sky was dark, but the air was calm. A few porch lights glowed like sentinels on watch. He stopped under the street lamp near the corner store and stood there for a while. He thought about what could have happened, what almost happened. He thought about how one action, one shove, one lie, one voice can ripple far beyond the moment it was made. And he thought about Loretta, the way she stood, the way she didn't yell, the way she never asked for anything but a phone call. That single call had changed everything. Because justice doesn't always come through courts or headlines. Sometimes it starts with a quiet voice saying, "No more." This story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about power. It was about value. The value of one woman's life. The value of a son's refusal to look the other way. The value of pushing back when the world assumes you'll stay quiet. And maybe, most of all, it was about this truth. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to fight with fists to leave a mark. And you don't have to wear a uniform to protect the people you love. So if you're watching this and you're tired, if you're angry, if you're wondering whether it's worth it to speak up when the system seems too big, let Loretta remind you. One voice can be enough, especially when that voice is telling the truth. Don't stay quiet. Someone's listening. Subscribe for more true stories that matter, and never forget the power of one voice.